And as mentioned tonight, with me in studio is Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Information, Communication and the Digital Economy, Eliud Owalo. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you too. It's my pleasure.
Thank you very much for being with us, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Waziri, before we begin with your ministry's scorecard, I'd like to talk about issues in the public domain.
Yes.
And we need to begin by clearing the air on what exactly is happening at the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation.
Yeah.
I'll begin with the termination of the contract of the then acting managing director KBC, Samuel Maina,
yes,
last year. What exactly led to the termination of that contract?
Well, we have processes to be followed in government by way of consultations. Now, the issue of Channel O contract with the KBC is a very historical issue, going way back to the year 2006. It was a lopsided contract that was not in favor, in my view, was not in favor of KBC. We have had cases in court for quite a long time. And at some point in time, there was a ruling that this case be referred to arbitration. So that arbitration process has been going on. And based on consultations in government, we gave an offer of what, in our view, could be the amount of money that KBC could pay for breach of contract, if at all there was breach of contract. The so-called Channel O flatly rejected that offer. These negotiations were without prejudice, for your information. And with Channel O having failed to accept the offer that was put on the table, essentially the negotiations collapsed. But without consultations, the MD went ahead and gave an offer which was not the initial amount of money that was put on the table.
Let me take you back to the offer, Bwana CS.
Yeah.
What was offered and who was involved in the consultations?
What happened is that we had a negotiation team consisting of officials from the Ministry of ICT, the Attorney General's Chambers, and KBC itself. But just to take you back a little bit, when I was 1 week in office last year, I got a request on my desk from the management and board of KBC asking me to authorize a travel to the to the UK for purposes of a meeting, arbitration meeting with the Channel O. Then I asked myself, this is an issue that involves colossal sums of money. How comes the ministry is not involved? How comes the Attorney General, as the principal advisor of the government, is not involved? And how comes the National Treasury, as the custodian of government resources, is not involved?
Who was to travel?
The chairman and the managing director. Okay? I declined. And then I sought advice from the Attorney General on that matter. This is what led to the constitution of a three-tier arbitration team involving the Ministry of ICT, involving the National Treasury and the Attorney General Chambers, and KBC as well. So that team was constituted based on advice from the Attorney General, and this is what led now to the deliberations. Now, when the offer was given to Channel O for 5 billion Kenyan shillings, they declined that offer. Okay? And subsequent to that, the negotiations collapsed because we couldn't give any better offer. But without consultations, the managing director went ahead and wrote a letter. Yeah?
The negotiations did collapse, but was he informed of the same? In manner of writing, was he informed that these negotiations, which did not involve...
But he was part and parcel of the negotiations, Lillian. He was part and parcel of the negotiations. And he knew that we were undertaking these negotiations without prejudice. He knew that an offer was given to Channel O, and Channel O declined the offer through their lawyers, which means, essentially means that the negotiations collapsed. If the negotiations collapse through an arbitration process, it means that the court proceedings goes to a logical conclusion, goes ahead to a logical conclusion. That is what ordinarily happens in such a case. If you opt for arbitration and that arbitration does not work, you go back to court and you let the court decide. So we, in our view, we expected this issue to be now sorted out through the courts because we were not going to pay anything more than what of the offer that the government had already given.
Which then came as a surprise to you, I would imagine, that the MD proceeded to commit such an expenditure, or rather to write over such an expenditure without the involvement of his seniors. Surely there was prior communication, there was back and forth communication. This would have required the involvement of his seniors, which is the ministry as well as the PS and indeed Treasury. Did this not happen when this communication?
Are you not privy to that communication? Are you privy to the communication that had happened? If you are privy to that communication, what are the figures that were involved? For purposes of clarity, what figures were involved? What offer did we give? You gave 5 billion as and what offer did the MD give in his letter? About 700 billion. Then how do you account for that inconsistency and contradiction? That is a monument of inconsistency and contradiction, and this is the problem that I had. I did ask him, where is this letter you have written coming from? What's the genesis of this letter? Did you consult the PS? Did you consult me? Have you gotten any communication from the Attorney General or Solicitor General, for that matter, on this issue with respect to these figures? He said the answer is no. So it was mind-boggling. I was left wondering, where did this communication come from? And mark you, by the time these negotiations collapsed, it was way, way, way back, about 4 or 5 months before. After a span of about 4 or 5 months, then the MD comes up with this letter from nowhere. And he did admit that there was an error in the currency quoted, and indeed that communication, we are privy to that as well. He admitted there was an error. So are you or anyone in your ministry then culpable in this error that caused the then acting
There is no culpability. This is a historical issue. You see, first of all, you need to understand that no money has been paid. Because the negotiations collapsed. The government has not paid any money as far as compensation is concerned. So no money has been spent. What we were trying to do is to abide by the advice from the Attorney General based on a historical case that started way back in the year 2006. It is not a contract that was not what was gotten into the other day. This is something that has been there since the year 2006. And successive governments have been trying to unlock this impasse without success. So this current government is not an exception as far as unlocking this issue is concerned.
So where are we on this issue? The National Broadcaster KBC is cash-strapped, and indeed a colossal amount is owed. And the offer that was offered, the monies that were offered were declined. So where are we on this issue?
The fact of the case is that as we speak, that case goes back to court, and it will be sorted out by the court to a logical conclusion. That is the position of government as of now, because we gave an offer which an LO declined. And we said we are not going to pay a penny more over and above what we had offered. So that case goes back to a logical conclusion within the court. And within that legal jurisprudence, we'll pick it up as and when it comes to that.
Right, let's talk about the National Broadcaster as we stay with KBC before we move to your ministry's scorecard, Waziri. The KBC, like I said, is cash-strapped. So in terms of the funding model for its financial resuscitation and revitalization, where is that money going to come from? What are the plans going ahead?
First of all, before even you think of extra money, you must ensure prudence of the utilization of the resources you have at your disposal. For a start, I've made sure, since coming into office, that we are not going to have revenue leakages at KBC. One of the avenues which has been a cash cow for KBC is the issue of land. Everybody has been targeting KBC land, either by way of rent or for purposes of outright purchase. And I've given firm instructions that, one, any land that was leased belonging to KBC, those leases will not be renewed at the under market rates that they were leased out at. I've ordered that we are going to have proper valuation of all assets of KBC, and if we are to lease out any property, then those properties have to be leased out at prevailing market rates. And those are firm instructions I've given. I've also given instructions that no property of KBC will be disposed of outside the law without conformity to the laid down rules and procedures. It is not just with KBC. We also have the same problem with the Postal Corporation of Kenya. We have been having instances where a property that is supposed to attract a market value of 1 million shillings by way of lease ends up being leased out at about 50,000, for example.
And then those in those organizations go out to connive with the lessees to share that difference for purposes of capital gain. And I've put a stop to that. I've said that is going to be part of our history. It's not going to be part and parcel of our operations moving forward. So I'm sealing all revenue leakages. 2, to revitalize KBC, and this is a commitment I made when I was undergoing my vetting in Parliament. To revitalize KBC, we have to modernize the broadcasting studio. That is 1. 2, we have also to upgrade the infrastructure, the KBC infrastructure, which largely is dilapidated, cracking under the weight of age. And we have reached out to prospective partners who can help us upgrade the infrastructure of KBC. One of the options, and this is a question I've been struggling, and we are holding consultations within government. Does it make sense, for example, to be in control of colossal sums of land in the name of KBC while the organization is struggling financially? So we are exploring ways and means through which we could commercialize some of those properties by way of public-private partnership. If, for example, we have got a housing investor who wants to put up low-cost housing, which is a major government program, and KBC has got land, idle land, we can get into a joint venture by way of public-private partnership for mutual benefit. Those are some of the options that we are pursuing. Yeah.
Now, in terms of the debt owed to the media, Waziri, by the government, specifically media houses that carry out government adverts, when it comes to offsetting debt, the accusation has been that you, and I'm not talking about you as Waziri Owalo, but that you and your predecessors play lip service. When will this debt be paid to media owners?
You see, there's no question of lip service. And that's an area, a space where I want to bring order equally as well. As we speak, we owe the media houses about 1.7 billion shillings. And we have agreed, I've told the media houses that we are progressively going to clear these debts. As at the last week of December, before we broke for Christmas, we had already given instruction that whatever money that we have collected by way of A&A, we start paying the media houses. And I've informed them personally. I called the respective leadership of the media houses and I gave them the proposal by way of payment. So it is something that is very much in their knowledge, that we are already making progress. That payment is being processed, and I believe in the course of this coming week, they should be able to get the initial installment of the payment. And progressively we will pay off that debt and clear it. But I want the media to also be realistic to changing circumstances in the operational environment. I want the media to run away from this notion that it is responsibility of the government to finance operations of the media by way of advertisement revenue. The amount of money you people need as media houses is colossal compared to the amount of money you are getting from government advertisement revenue. The operational environment is dynamic. You cannot continue doing your business the way you are doing business 5-10 years ago. Today, a critical segment of your customer base or stakeholder market base has migrated to the digital space. And you must correspondingly reinvent or re-engineer your operations to align to that. The media, the stakeholders have migrated without prior notice. Yet you are still stuck in the past. That is not sustainable. You must re-engineer your business model to be responsive to the dynamism in the operational environment. And that is something you guys need to start doing as at yesterday.
But what would you say then to those who think the government reducing spending on media advertising is victimizing the media through these pending bills? Because there is a general consensus in the industry that there is an element of victimization because of these pending bills.
Let me tell you something. It is not the business of government to finance the private sector. The role of government is to ensure that we have got enabling policy, legal, and regulatory framework for the private sector to thrive, and a level playing field for everybody to thrive. It is not the business of government to finance the private sector or even to compete in business with the private sector for that matter. All we need to do is to ensure that we have a sound policy, legal, and regulatory framework that would facilitate the private sector, the media inclusive, to survive. And this is why recently, about 3 months ago, I did constitute a sector working group that was going to look at changes and dynamism in the operational environment, and advise government on what we need to do to align to those changes. One of the fundamental areas of concern, of course, is the media space. Dynamism in the operational environment, circumstances have changed. What do we need to do for sustainability of the media? And when I constituted this committee, I made sure that it was not just consisting of individuals within government, but the private sector and the media inclusive. The president of the Editors Guild sits in that committee. Tom Mushindi, a renowned journalist in this country, is the chair of the media thematic group of that committee. The chair of the Media Owners Association is a member of that committee. So we are adapting a participatory and consultative approach as we respond to changes and operational issues in the operational environment. I did say from the onset, in fact, when I came into office, Lillian, my first official function was a function of the Editors Guild. And I told the media, or the Editors Guild for that matter, at that point in time, that we shall adopt a participatory, all-inclusive approach in everything that we are going to do. There is no decision as a ministry that we are going to make from a policy perspective without involving all the integral stakeholders, the media inclusive.
Right.
Yeah.
Away from that, talking about the Communications Authority of Kenya and matters cybersecurity, let's go to the recent appointment of the new Director General. You appointed David Mugonyi as the Director General. Just curious about how many candidates were considered, how many were interviewed before we get into issues cybersecurity and what is being done to regulate social media.
Just to put us in the correct perspective, I did not appoint the Director General of the Communication Authority of Kenya. That does not lie within my functional domain. It is the domain of the board of the Communication Authority of Kenya to do that. So what happens is that when there was a vacancy in that position, they did the advertisements.
Right.
Okay? As is required by law, as a minister, I'm not supposed to interfere in that process. They did the advertisement, they got applications, they did the shortlisting, they did the interviews, and as is required by procedures within government, they sought the concurrence of the head of the public service with respect to the candidate they had recommended for that position. Then the head of the public service simply communicated to me as the minister to facilitate operationalization of that decision. That's what I did. I just concurred and I asked the Board of Communication Authority to go ahead and appoint the person who was recommended as number one.
Right, and with the CAK, again, just on matters cybersecurity, Waziri, and what is being done to regulate social media, we've just done a story here on NHIF, away from social media, just regulating the cyberspace, looking at infiltration and what we've just reported right now with the NHIF, the threats that lie therein and what we've seen in terms of monies being dispersed, fake monies being dispersed into issues that were not actually requiring of those particular funds. In terms of cybersecurity, fake accounts, and uncovering social engineering schemes, where are we at as regards cybersecurity and the CAK?
It is not the preserve of the CAK alone to handle cyber insecurity in this country. It is just one of the arms of government or entities in government that is involved with this. As far as cybersecurity is concerned, we are adapting a whole government approach. It entails CAK, it entails the Ministry of Defense, it entails the Ministry of Interior, several facets of government. So CA is just one of them. But let me also clarify that we are determined to pursue our digitalization agenda, going the full hog as far as our digitalization agenda is concerned. We are not going to stop digitalization because of cyber insecurity. All we need to do is to build a robust, comprehensive risk mitigation framework around that space so that we are not exposed. As we digitalize, we ensure that we are not exposed to cyber attacks. And that's exactly what we are doing. We are ensuring that any data that comes into position of government, public data belonging to members of the public that comes into position of government remains private and it also remains secure. And that is why we have gone ahead and even operationalized the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner to help us in that functional domain. Of course, working with other facets of government. As we do this, we have a multi-agency government team that is continuously monitoring the trends globally in cybersecurity, and also benchmarking with practices as far as mitigation, global best practices as far as mitigation against cybersecurity is concerned, so that we see where we have got certain advanced economies, then we see what we can borrow from there, but customize to meet our unique peculiar situation here.
Right, and before we take a break, and we'll be looking at the scorecard in your ministry, Waziri, I want to talk about the assembling of smartphones, the local assembling of smartphones. And this is a question that's coming in from our viewers. There are already cheaper smartphones in the country. These phones are expensive. They're retailing at 7,499 shillings from what I understand. So in terms of the thinking behind the local assembling of these smartphones, what was the thinking behind that?
The rationale is the fact that we want to facilitate universal access to internet connectivity and consumption of government services. We have migrated virtually all government services to the digital platform. When we came into government, we only had 350 services on the eCitizen platform. Today, we have gone ahead and digitalized a whopping 12,642 services against a target of 5,000, which is no mean achievement. But the question we are asking ourselves is, if all government services will be available virtually on the eCitizen platform, do all Kenyans, or does a critical mass of Kenyans have access to smartphones? The answer is no. So proactively, as government, we have come out to fill that gap, to fill that void in the market. And we have partnered with the telecommunication companies, specifically Safaricom, JTL, and other private investors, to embark on local assembly of smart-enabled telephones. The rationale of local assembly as opposed to importation is that there are various attendant costs that will be eliminated. Import duties, there are logistical costs involving importation and several other costs that will be eliminated. The net result is that we are actually going to end up with a cheaper phone, a cheaper smartphone. And mark you, we have got other smartphones in the market that may not be, that are actually counterfeit. So we have ensured that we are filling in that void. And as we speak today, that assembly, the plant, is already churning out on average 4,500 units of those devices on a daily basis.
But what is the uptake of these smartphones? 4,500 daily, but what is the uptake in comparison to the other dominant phones in the market, the other dominant
The Neon brand is fairly attractive in the market. You'd say that the consumption rate or the uptake rate is about 80% so far.
There's Neon and Neon Smarter and Neon Ultra.
Yes.
What about the Neon Ultra?
The Neon Ultra is the same. It's just a slightly upgraded version.
It's an upgraded version. And I'm curious about the names of these phones, the branding behind them. These are locally assembled phones. Does this mean then that there was a partnership?
A brand is a brand, no?
No, because it's a locally assembled phone. That's what I'm asking. So you would imagine that because it's locally assembled, that we would get some ownership in terms of the branding, the titling of the phone. So we're seeing Neon Smarter and Neon Ultra. That's just me being curious.
That we leave to the plant, the people at the plant to decide. It's a question of how you want to do your branding.
Okay, just checking whether it was a local,
from a policy perspective,
invention.
we don't go ahead and get involved in operational issues. We focus on policy, regulations, laws and regulations.
Okay, we're taking a short break, Waziri, and when we come back, we'll be looking at your scorecard 1 year into office. Where are we at in terms of fiber optic network, free Wi-Fi rollout in public spaces, on government services going online? Where are we at on that? And indeed, how to narrow the divide in terms of digital awareness and literacy. A lot of people still not digital savvy in many parts of the country. We'll be looking into issues around that when we come back. Please send in your question. The hashtag is Sunday Live and the SMS number is 22422.